In anticipation of Lord Chaitanya's appearance on Monday, I'm preparing some topics with lots of illustrations to help us get an appreciation of Lord Chaitanya's activities. One of the most significant, there's many significant, but one of the most significant is the deliverance of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Now we know of him mainly as the Bhattacharya or Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, but actually his given name was Vasudeva. Vasudeva. Thus, Sarvabhauma is a title, and Bhattacharya is also a title, because he was so vastly learned, Bhattacharya. And he was the most learned person in the world, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Vasudeva. A little bit of the background. I'm going to give some names and relatives and things like that, because it becomes important as the story of his life unfolds, or his deliverance by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu unfolds. So, sorry about that, but it's a little history. His father was a well-known Brahmana teacher, Maheshwara Visharada. And his father, Maheshwara Visharada, was a close friend and classmate with Mother Sachi's father. He was a close friend and classmate with Mother Sachi's father. Mother Sachi's father, you're going to hear his name several times, so get used to it. Nilambar Chakravarti. Nilambar Chakravarti was celebrated in Navadvip as an astrologer and one who knew how to perform particular rituals and yagyas for Vaishnava Brahmanas. So Nilambar Chakravarti and Maheshwara Visharada were classmates and close friends. This becomes important later when Sarvabhauma, who is the son, meets Mahaprabhu and comes to know, oh, your father, Jagannath Mishra, and Sachi's father, Nilambar Chakravarti, were both very respected by my father, and therefore I offer respect to you. There's a family connection, in other words. His father, Sarvabhauma's father, and the other, Sachi's father and Sachi's husband, were very much respected by Sarvabhauma's father. It's important later. It plucks some heartstrings in the hard-hearted Sarvabhauma. According to Gora Godadesh Dipika, what's that book? That book is a who's who. Everybody in Gora Lila has their counterpart in Krishna Lila. So, according to Gora Godadesh Dipika, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had formerly been Brahaspati, the foremost scholar in the heavenly planets. You've heard of his name before? Brahaspati? He's the priest of the demigods, right? So that's outside of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. In Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he's way up there in his learning. Then Nilambar Chakravarti, before the assembled relatives and friends, Nilambar Chakravarti spoke the astrological prediction of Lord Chaitanya's future. For this reason, it is said that Nilambar Chakravarti is the incarnation of Gargamuni. Who's Gargamuni? Gargamuni is the Brahmana in Mathura who did the name-giving ceremony for Krishna and Balaram, Gargamuni. He did many other things. But as Nilambar Chakravarti did the astrology chart, and then based on the astrology chart, he gave a name. We discussed that earlier today. Remember the name that he gave? You were there this afternoon, weren't you? No. Sitting in the front in the green shirt. Yeah. Were you with us this afternoon? Yeah. You forgot. Starts with a V. V. Vishvambar. Very good. Very good. I'm not so good with names either. Vishvambar. Vishvambar was the name given by Nilambar Chakravarti Thakur. Vishvambar means the maintainer of the universe, of the Vishva. Maintainer of the universe. And Chaitanya Charitamrita author says, Dubrin is the dhatu, or the verbal root from Vishvambar, and it means to maintain by flooding the world with love of God. Vishvambar. So he's Gargamuni. So these are very special people. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Nilambar Chakravarti Thakur. Now, it's going to become important as we go along, but Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had a brother, and his brother was Madhusudana, and this Vachaspati is also a title. So Vidya Vachaspati, Madhusudana Vachaspati, he's referred to by both names. So who is that? That's Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's brother. And one more name, just so we get everybody straight, because he's going to show up a whole bunch. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya also had a sister. He had one brother and one sister. It doesn't give the sister's name, but it gives the brother-in-law, the one who married his sisters, Gopinath Acharya. So Gopinath Acharya, unlike his brother-in-law Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Gopinath Acharya was a very elevated Vaishnav, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya wasn't a Vaishnav until he met Lord Chaitanya. He was super scholar, super scholar. And according to Gaura Gunadishtapika, the same Who's Who book, Gopinath Acharya, who was formerly a Vraja Gopi named Ratnavali. Ratnavali is further described in Gunadishtapika as a very dear friend of Radharani. So that's Gopinath Acharya. And in another place in the same book, it also mentions, according to the opinion of others, he was an incarnation of Lord Brahma. So we have quite a caste here. Brahaspati, the chief priest of the demigods. Gargamuni, the Brahmana in Mathura during Krishna's pastimes. And either Ratnavali, a dear associate of Srimati Radharani, or Lord Brahma. So we have other names. I'll be saying them a number of times, so slowly it'll start to sink in who's who. But it's very elevated personalities we're going to be discussing. So amongst all these persons, particularly Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was especially scholarly. And he was scholarly in two main areas: Vedanta, like Vedanta Sutra, Vedanta. And what school of learning was he from? Mayavad school, Shankaracharya. He knew Vedanta backwards and forwards. And he also knew something that's maybe new to some of you here, but the 6 darshans. What's that? Some of you know. Okay, 6 darshans. They're teachings by teachers that are kind of like an overview of, and they take a certain path as an overview of the Vedas in general. And they're well known. And he was very accomplished in all of them. He knew them and he taught them. So he was a very popular teacher. So just a little stepping back. We the other day, wasn't here. Where was it? It was in Atlanta. In Atlanta, there was a request, so I spoke about the life of Jiva Goswami. Jiva Goswami. Do you know who is Jiva Goswami? You've heard his name? You've heard the 6 Goswamis, right? So he's one of the 6. And he was one of the young ones. He had 2 uncles, Rupa and Sanatan Goswami, and he was their nephew. He was their brother's son, nephew, Jiva Goswami. So Jiva Goswami, when he was about 12 years old, how old are you? 9. So in 3 years you can become Jiva Goswami's follower, okay? When he was 12 years old, under Lord Nityananda's, his father had died untimely, and he was feeling great separation from his uncles, and he decided he wanted to go be with his uncles. So he left home with his mother's permission, and he wanted to first go to the place of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, which was Navadvip. What's up? Oh, gosh. Jiva Goswami was met in Navadvip by Lord Nityananda, because Lord Nityananda is all-knowing, he's omniscient, and he knew that Jiva Goswami was coming to Navadvip, so he went to Navadvip, and he met. So before he went to Vrindavan, he met Lord Nityananda. And they're very nice. Lord Nityananda understood his heart, so Lord Nityananda took him all the places, the principal places of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, and explained about Lord Chaitanya, what he did here, what he did there. He pointed out, because it was only a short while after Lord Chaitanya actually resided in Navadvip that Jiva Goswami visited, so he was looking much the same. So Jiva Goswami was very enthused. And Nityananda then confirmed, I know that your heart's desire is to go to Vrindavan and be with your uncles. However, my instruction for you, and Lord Chaitanya wants you to do that also, because Lord Chaitanya was present on the planet at this time. Lord Chaitanya wants this of you also, but before you go there, go to Benares, where there's a student of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya who is residing in Benares, and he will train you thoroughly in these 6 darshans. But he also knows Lord Chaitanya's teachings, so he'll help you understand the refutation or the higher position of Vaishnavism compared to the 6 darshans that are not Vaishnava. You follow all that? So where did Madhusudana Vachaspati, that wasn't his name. The scholar that Jiva Goswami studied under was living in Benares. So he learned from Sarvabhauma. And he instructed Jiva Goswami even before he went to Vrindavan. In other words, as a young man, from 12 until he was 20, he was already thoroughly trained in preparing himself to speak Lord Chaitanya's teachings or write Lord Chaitanya's teachings, knowing what the opposing group of people would say. So when he was writing, he would make some statement supported by scripture and say, some people will object and they'll say such and such. To that such and such, here's the response from scripture. Because he already knew it. He was already learned in Benares. So, back to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. The point here is, his disciple and student was a very important person in training Jiva Goswami, who carried on the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, following Rupa and Sanatan. He was well equipped. So he had tremendous learning in Vedanta and also the six darshans, but not Nyaya. What's Nyaya? Nyaya means logic. Nyaya. So he wanted to become skilled in that third field also. And there was a celebrated person, most famous person in all of India at the time, residing, had a school in Mithila. So Brahmins can't say no to a student, especially a Brahmana student. So he wanted to enroll in his school. And so Pakshadhar accepted him. And he taught him like he taught all the other students. But when Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya requested a copy of the book from which he was teaching Nyaya, he refused. Because he wanted to be like the number one guy. And if I give the book to Sarvabhauma, he'll be the number one guy. So that was not a problem because Sarvabhauma had a perfect memory. He just memorized the book and then he wrote a copy from his memory. Some people have good memories. I'm not one of them. So now he went back to Navadvip and he became the most celebrated scholar in all of India. Vedanta, the six darshans, and Nyaya. And he became so renowned, students from all over India came and attended his school. He had a big school. And his notoriety went as far as the king of Orissa, King Prataparudra, the king of Orissa, invited him to become his chief priest. And so he left Navadvip, he left his brother, he left his father, he left Navadvip to go to Puri, and later we'll hear more about, tomorrow, we'll hear more about King Prataparudra, but our focus now is on Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. His credential was the most scholarly person in all of India, which meant at that time the most scholarly person of all in all world. I don't know, Albert Einstein or something like that. You can't get any higher than Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya in all fields of study, except Vaishnavism. Now the place where he resided was Vidyanagara. Vidyanagara. Here's some photographs from Vidyanagara. This is the house that he used to live in. It's not very well kept. And since that time, since he lived there, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur established a small temple in Gaudiya Math at Vidyanagara. And here's the temple. There's a pile of dirt in front of the temple, but that's not permanent. The temple is in the back. And let's take a look at the deities that are being worshipped. Bhaktisiddhanta established these deities. In the center is Radha Shyamasundara, and to our left is Mahaprabhu. And this is the deities presently being worshipped. at the Gaudiya Math at Vidyanagara. The deities pictured here are said to be deities that were personally worshipped by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's brother, because he stayed behind when Sarvabhauma went to Puri. And so deities of Lord Chaitanya with his arms extended out like this, and Lord Nityananda. And notice in front of those Gaura deities, there's Radha Krishna. Here's a close-up of the Radha Krishna there at the feet of Gaura. So we don't hear much about Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya until later. And the later comes when Lord Chaitanya, having taken sannyas, we discussed his sannyas, and at his mother's request, he went to Puri. And when he reached Puri, something happened. So something that happened, this little incident, but it's part of his Leela. He had given his danda to Jagatananda to carry. Jagatananda went to gather alms, some items for their traveling party to have. So he gave the danda to Nityananda to hold. Nityananda had a big argument with the danda. Who are you? You're hard and you have no, my master doesn't need to undergo austerities. Who do you think you are? And this and that. And he broke the danda in 3 places and threw it in the river. And when Lord Chaitanya came back, he was in a mood of great ecstatic love. He didn't even notice his danda was missing. When they reached a certain place, some of you have been to Puri, there's a Taranala bridge. It's a very special place, celebrated in Gaura Leela, and celebrated even locally. He came to external consciousness and said to Jagatananda, where's my danda? And he said, I gave it to him. And Nityananda, where's my danda? There are different accounts. One of the accounts says, in a swoon of ecstasy, you fell on the danda and it broke, so I threw it away. And if I should be punished, then you can do with me what you like. And Mahaprabhu scolded him and said, I only have this, beside my kamandalu, my water pot, the only thing I have is my danda, and you can't even maintain that. I don't want to travel with you anymore. So you can go ahead and go to the Jagannath temple, and I'll stay behind and come later. Or I'll go ahead and you stay behind and you can come later, but I'm not going to travel with you anymore. It was a Leela, because he wanted to enter the Jagannath temple alone. He said, no, you go, we'll come later. So when he entered the Jagannath temple, he saw the deity of Lord Jagannath, which you can see in the background in this painting, with his arms outstretched, wanting to embrace Krishna. He ran, and in ecstasy he fainted on the ground, and the guards thought he was some madman or something. So they raised their sticks and they're ready to toss him out of the temple. Just at that time, on the left side of the screen, or the painting, that's Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. He came and he saw this sannyasi lying on the ground, and the guards ready to hit him with sticks. He told them to stop. So because he's Sarvabhauma, they stopped. And he said, I want to bring him to my home. So when he brought him to his home, he didn't know who he was. He's this 24, just turned now 25-year-old young sannyasi, golden in color, beautiful features, etc. And the other that were with him in his party, they hadn't come yet, so he didn't even know who he was. But he's a super scholar, so he wanted to see if he's cheating or if it's genuine. So he was in a state of trance of ecstasy. So what did Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya do? He took some little ball of cotton, removed some strands from the ball of cotton, and held the strands of cotton before his nose. Because if he was faking, then he would be breathing. And if he wasn't faking, his life here would be suspended. So he held the strands of cotton before his nose, and it hardly moved. There was something because he was alive, but it wasn't breathing. So he understood this is ecstatic trance. He's the real thing. Because he's a scholar. He knows how to test things. Meanwhile, at the Jagannath temple, the other four in that traveling party came. The four by name: Lord Nityananda, Jagatananda, Mukunda Datta, and I'm not sure if he was with them. Chandrasekhar Acharya is the one that did the yagya for his sannyas initiation. He may or may not have been there. I'm not so clear. But it's a small party, four others plus Lord Chaitanya. And they reached the Jagannath temple. And when they reached the Jagannath temple, immediately Gopinath Acharya, remember his name, Gopinath Acharya was the brother-in-law. Gopinath Acharya had lived for a long time. If you remember going back, when we spoke about Lord Chaitanya receiving initiation from Ishwara Puri, I don't know if some of you heard that class, some of you didn't. Ishwara Puri, another name, Ishwara Puri was the initiating guru of Lord Chaitanya, Ishwara Puri. And Ishwara Puri, for some time, stayed in Navadvip at the house of Gopinath Acharya. Gopinath Acharya was a Vaishnav. He was a pure Vaishnav. And Gopinath Acharya knew Gadadhar Pandit, because Gadadhar Pandit would also come and hear from Ishwara Puri every day, here in his discussions on his book, Krishna Lilamrita. These are details, but you just try to catch the picture. Gopinath Acharya knew Gadadhar Pandit because they were from the same place. They were from Navadvip. So when he saw Gadadhar Pandit in the Jagannath temple, it's like, Gadadhar Pandit, Haribol, how nice to see you. What brought you here to Jagannath Puri? And he said, we've come with Nimai Pandit. He's taken sannyas. Oh, really? He took sannyas. And so, do you know where he is? Yes. There's a young sannyasi. That's Nimai Pandit, now Sri Krishna Chaitanya. And he's at the house of my brother-in-law. And my brother-in-law is Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. So I'll take you there, and you can see for yourself. So this is saying he tested his breathing at the Jagannath temple. Gopinath Acharya saw Gadadhar Pandit, told them where he was. He was lying in the house of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya unconscious. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya didn't know what to do, but they knew what to do. They got out some kartals and started chanting Hare Krishna. And softly. And in course of time, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to external consciousness. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya recommended, please don't go to the Jagannath temple alone going forward in time. Go with me in case you have another mishap. I'll be there and everything will be okay. And he invited the others to take their bath in the sea, take darshan of Jagannath, and then he would arrange for their prasad. So all of that was done. And then there was some discussion. They came to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's house, and he was inquiring, who is he? So he heard from Gopinath Acharya, here's these names again, his mother's father was Nilambar Chakravarti. And his father is Jagannath Mishra, or Purandara Jagannath Mishra. That's another title. So, both of those persons, Jagannath Mishra, his father, and his mother's father, were very much respected by my father. So that's the heart connection. This young sannyasi is connected to someone who is very close to my father, and therefore I hold them very close to me. That the heart string was pulled. Their residential quarters were arranged by Sarvabhauma. He had influence in the house of Kashi Mishra. Now, the house of Kashi Mishra ended up becoming the place where Lord Chaitanya eventually stayed also. Gambhira, celebrated place, is in the house of Kashi Mishra. So everyone's now had their meal and they're situated and they're doing whatever they're doing, taking rest or something. And now the focus moves to the discussion between Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Gopinathacharya, the most learned scholar in the world, and his brother-in-law. So Gopinathacharya very much wanted Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya to understand the divinity of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he knew it. He knew it very well. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya didn't know it very well. He was super scholar, but he wasn't super bhakta. And so they had a little argument, friendly argument, but an argument. And as you see on the screen here, Gopinathacharya was trying through scripture to establish that Lord Chaitanya was the personality of Godhead. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was referring to scripture and saying that's not possible because this. And then Gopinathacharya said, yes, it is possible because of that. And they were, back and forth, and there was disagreement. It's okay, people can disagree. And finally, at the end of the discussion, almost the end of the discussion, he said, you're a great scholar and a teacher of many disciples. Indeed, there's no other scholar like you on earth. Nonetheless, because you're bereft even of a pinch of the Lord's mercy, you cannot understand him, even though he is present in your home. The personality of Godhead has come to your home, and you don't recognize that because you're such a scholar. You don't have even a pinch of his mercy. So scholarship is again and again and again an important understanding that comes in Chaitanya Charitamrita, but scholarship alone is insufficient. We all know jnana is not sufficient to know Krishna. The super scholar Sarvabhauma, no one's greater scholar, but he couldn't understand through scholarship. So the discussion ends with his saying, like a benediction almost, when the Lord will be pleased with you, you will also understand these conclusions, and we'll quote from the Shastras, which happened. The blessing given by Gopinathacharya. So next day, super scholar Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya wants to do some nice service to help this young 24, 25-year-old sannyasi. We say he took sannyas just like a month. He took sannyas on Makara Sankranti. How long ago? Gaur Purnima is coming up. How long ago was Makara Sankranti? Huh? About 2 months? So he took sannyas and then so he's now, so his birthday, by this time he's probably 25. So he's 25-year-old, beautiful features, very young. It's not going to be easy for him to maintain his sannyas vows. So if he likes, I can train him in Vedanta. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came the next morning, he volunteered. He said, "Oh, that would be very kind of you. You're so kind. Please protect me so I can uphold my sannyas vows." And so Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was thrilled. Super scholar is going to teach this young sannyasi Shankaracharya's teachings on Vedanta Sutra. So what you've seen this photograph or the painting before. He had him sit. Lord Chaitanya was on an elevated seat because he's a sannyasi. Sarvabhauma was seated below him because he's a grahastha. But Bhattacharya was, although he was a grahastha, he had as students many, it said thousands of sannyasi students under him. So here he is teaching one, like a one-on-one tutorial. And it went on for 7 days, from morning till night, and then the next day morning till night, for 7 days. And at the end of the 8th day, you know what happened. At the end of the 8th day, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, "I don't know if you're understanding what I'm saying because you don't say anything. You don't ask any questions. So, can you tell me? Are you understanding what I'm saying?" And Lord Chaitanya's reply was, "I understand Vedanta Sutra very well. However, your words, the more you speak, the more it clouds the meaning." "Oh, really? So if you understand Vedanta Sutra, then you please explain it to me." So Lord Chaitanya explained Vedanta Sutra to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And it was very simple. It's right in Chaitanya Charitamrita, their conversation. And it was, wow. Because he's super scholar. And he's hearing the absolute truth from the personality of Godhead. Wow, that was really good. I never heard that before. So could you please explain the Atma Rama verse from Srimad Bhagavatam? You've heard of that one before? The Atma Rama verse? Would you like to know what it is? The Atma Rama verse is from Canto 1, Chapter 7, and it's spoken by Sutta Goswami. No, it's spoken by Sutta Goswami, yes. And it's an explanation of the understandings that Vyasadeva received and then passed on to Shukadeva Goswami. So the question that was asked was, why did Shukadeva Goswami, he's already a realized person, why did he study Srimad Bhagavatam under his father? And then this is the verse, it's the answer, that even Atma means the self. Rama means pleasure or happiness or bliss, joy, spiritual happiness. Atma Ramas, cha. Even the self-realized persons, they derive great happiness and satisfaction by hearing this message of Srimad Bhagavatam. What to speak of all the rest of us that aren't self-realized. But great satisfaction is achieved. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was scholarly, and he wanted to hear Lord Chaitanya's explanation of that verse. So Lord Chaitanya said, well, you're very scholarly. Why don't you explain it? Okay, I'll explain it. I can explain it in 9 different ways. So he explained it in 9 different ways. And then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, can you explain it? So Lord Chaitanya explained it without touching any of the meanings of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya in many more ways. Now, there is a purpose to all of this. The purpose to all of this was the access that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had to understanding who was Lord Chaitanya was 2 main things. The mercy of his brother-in-law, Gopinathacharya was a great devotee, and he got the mercy of his brother-in-law. And his capacity for doors to open and light to come in was through scholarship. And Lord Chaitanya just displayed scholarship that was never heard by him before. And with that light, a little light went on, saying, wait a minute, you're not just a sannyasi, you're the personality of Godhead. And he said it. You're not just a young sannyasi. As my brother-in-law said, you're the personality of Godhead. Because no one can explain these things like you did otherwise. Lord Chaitanya smiled, and he showed him, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, what you see behind Lord Chaitanya, this six-armed form. Sad means six, Sadbhuja, the six-armed form of the Lord. So 2 arms holding a flute, 2 arms holding the danda and kamandalu of Lord Chaitanya, and 2 arms holding the bow and arrow of Lord Ram. That's the Sadbhuja form. Now, in other places it says first he showed his 4-handed Narayana form, then the 2-handed form of Krishna, and then the Sadbhuja form. So the details of what was said is a little inconsistent, but at least the Sadbhuja form. Now I'm going to show you a number of illustrations of this form. There's Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya looking a little more chubby than the other painting showed. And in a very opulent setting, more than the other painting showed. But there's the Sadbhuja form behind Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He displayed his divinity in this form. And here's what's on the wall. It's not a 3-dimensional, it's a bas relief, meaning the backside of the deity is the wall, and the front side of the deity is what's coming in front. So, and that you see the cloth down here, they changed the cloth. You'll see several photographs. They changed the cloth and over his head like this. But there's the 6-armed form, and here's that same form against the wall over in the corner, and he has a different cloth on in the lower part of his body. Here's a looking straight forward with another colored cloth. Here's the pujari doing the puja of the Sadbhuja form in the house of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And here's what it looks like in the winter, because it gets pretty cold. In the house of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, there's a cave. The cave has its opening in the floor, and one direction the cave moves towards the sea. Another direction, the cave or tunnel, not cave, tunnel, moves towards the Jagannath temple, because his house is not so far from the Jagannath temple. So it's said that he would travel to go to see Lord Jagannath, sometimes going through that tunnel. And there's many, many paintings. I just selected some of them. Here's one celebrated ISKCON painting showing the Sadbhuja form that was shown to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Here's another kind of classic type of artwork. And here's another. And I don't know who the other person, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya apparently is on the left, and my guess is it's King Prataparudra on the right, although he wasn't present. So the 6-armed form, and here's another smaller version. Here's a photograph of a diorama where it's depicting Sarvabhauma falling flat before Lord Chaitanya, who's showing him the 6-armed form. So not only he showed him this form, but he also then explained to him who he was, all the truths of his identity and his mission. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was overwhelmed. One can only imagine. He was overwhelmed. So that's this. He was delivered. by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Spontaneously, super scholar Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya composed 100 verses in Sanskrit. Those 100 verses in Sanskrit were later found in a book by Murari Gupta, and 2 of those verses are found in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So he wrote them and expressed them to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And hearing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's hearing Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's 100 verses spontaneously composed, he was very happy, and he embraced Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. When it wasn't over yet, as soon as Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was very elderly, he started dancing and jumping and calling loudly, and Gopinath Acharya heard him calling loudly, and he came and started laughing, and he was so happy to see his brother in this state of consciousness. And he made a comment. I like this one. Logic is like a dry oil cake from which all the oil has been extracted. The Bhattacharya passed his life in eating such dry cakes, but now you have made him drink the nectar of transcendental pastimes. It is certainly your great mercy upon him. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya then said, he's now a full-fledged devotee. So he said, it's not just, as I was explained to him, you've come to deliver the whole world. You've delivered me. I was the hardest case of all, and you've delivered me. So I'm permanently indebted to you, always at your service. Anything that you would like, you please let me know. Mahaprabhu again embraced him, and they all separated. Next morning, Mahaprabhu wanted to test him. So next morning, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did what he did every morning. He went for the Upala Bhog, the first offering, even before Mangalarti, of offering some items. So the Pujari gave him some Mahaprasad. And immediately, early in the morning, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's house, who was still in bed. And he gave him the Mahaprasad. Now, those of you that know what Brahminical rules are, you don't eat before you do your worship. What to speak of without getting out of bed and taking a bath and brushing your teeth? You don't eat. But Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya immediately accepted the prasad and started eating it. And Mahaprabhu said, wait a minute, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, you're spoiling your Brahminical principles. And then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, being a great scholar, cited verses and verses and verses indicating that the prasad of Lord Jagannath is not different than the Supreme Lord. Even if it comes from a distant place, one should accept it immediately. He defeated Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya was very happy. Now I can see you become a person that has all faith in Jagannath Prasad. So, mission accomplished. One of the verses that is in these 100 verses is the following. You can say it with me if you like. It's a celebrated verse. Vairagya vidya nija bhakti yoga shikshartam eka purushat puranaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Shariradhari Kripa Budhir Yastamaham Prabhadye. So Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga. Nija means his own. Nija Bhakti Yoga. He taught his own devotional service combined with knowledge and detachment. Vairagya Vidya, these two, Vidya and Vairagya, are very much esteemed within the Vedas, knowledge and detachment. But his Mahaprabhu's knowledge of detachment was a byproduct of bhakti, his own devotional service, Nija Bhakti Yoga. So I'll just read the Sri Krishna Chaitanya Sharira Dari. He has accepted this form of Sri Krishna Chaitanya, which is Kripambodhi. Ambodhi means an ocean, and Kripa means mercy. He's an ocean of mercy. Yas tamaham prapadya, I surrender unto him. So it starts at the end. Let me take shelter of the Supreme Personality Godhead, Sri Krishna, who has descended in the form of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to teach us real knowledge, his devotional service, and detachment from whatever does not foster Krishna consciousness. He has descended because he is an ocean of transcendental mercy. Let me surrender unto his lotus feet. This is a celebrated verse. It's a good one to memorize, or just to hear it and meditate on it. But let's do it one more time. Vairagya vidya nija bhakti yoga shikshartam eka purushak puranaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Shariradhari Kripam bodhiryas tamaham prapadye. That is one of the 100 verses. And another one of the 100 verses is found here. It's also found in Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's less celebrated. I'll just say it myself. Kalan nashtam bhakti yogam nijam yaha pradush kartum Krishna Chaitanya nama avir bhutas tasya padaravinde Gadham Nilatam Chitta Brigna. So let my consciousness, which is like a brigna, a honeybee, take shelter of the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, who has just now appeared as Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to teach the ancient system of devotional service to himself. This system had almost been lost due to the influence of time. So that's 2 of the 100 verses. And that's our little discussion on the deliverance of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. We're going to hear some more tomorrow because he didn't stop. He had a very important role to play as a super scholar, chief priest of the king. And he did many things, including helping the king get Lord Chaitanya's association. He did many other things too. We'll hear some of them tomorrow. Vasudev Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya Ki Jai. So let's see if there's some discussion. Yes?
So we know Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, we know Prakashananda Saraswati, and Keshav Kashmiri. So, like, all of these are scholars.
Yes, they are scholars.
So how do we categorize it? Like, because Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is the greatest scholar. So what category are the other ones? Because one was the Digvijay. So is there like a meter to like this one is like great in this, and the other one is greater in that?
You're asking several questions at the same time. One of them is what is their area of specialty, and the other is, in the barometer, are they at a 2 or a 5 or a 10? That's when you're asking those 2 questions. Yes? So, Keshava Kashmiri was not a Vedantist. He was a poet. He was very good in Sanskrit and composing Sanskrit teachings, but he was also knowledgeable in the Vedas in general. But he wasn't per se from the Shankaracharya school. So he was just a learned person, a worshipper of Goddess Saraswati, and very learned. And his program was pride. He would travel and go to places of high learning and then find out who's the most learned person there, and then challenge them into debate. And that was his thing. So he had the little prefix, Digvijay, for people who travel and try to conquer others, Digvijay. It was a Brahmana from Kashmir, so Keshava, Kashmiri. So that's, and know how, the barometer, he was very learned. Everywhere he went in places of high learning, he would always be victorious. So he was way up there, but he wasn't a Vaishnav. Lord Chaitanya helped him become a Vaishnav, but, in a very creative way. Now, the other two mentioned, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he was a householder, and Prakashananda was a sannyasi. Both Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Prakashananda Saraswati had students who were sannyasis. One who was a householder, the other was a sannyasi who had students who were sannyasis. And, because Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was based in Puri, there were Vaishnavas also in Puri. And Benares, it was primarily Mayavadis. That was the place. It's the place for Mayavadis. So he was, in comparison to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, just repeatedly said, he was the most learned person in all of India at the time. So if you want to do a scale, maybe Prakashananda is a 9 and Sarvabhauma is a 10. And because he was in Puri, many people knew of him because many people come to Puri. And because he was the chief priest of the king, people knew of him for that reason also. So he was a celebrity. And then when he became a Vaishnav, all of his followers also became Vaishnavas. And Prakashananda became influenced by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He also became a Vaishnav. And his followers became a Vaishnav. That was pretty amazing. Wholesale. That's like a tissue box. You pull a corner of a tissue and the whole tissue comes out, not just the corner. That was his system. Anything else? All the way in the back? Mataji? Yes.
I'm not sure it's part of the topic, but Mahaprabhu stayed at Kashi Mishra's school. Can you mention a little bit about Kashi Mishra? Was he the follower of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya? When he got changed into Vaishnava, he became a Vaishnava?
No, he wasn't a follower. Kashi Mishra was the priest or the guru of the king. Kashi Mishra was the guru of King Prataparudra. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was the chief priest of the king. And so they had a relationship. And he, in the house of Kashi Mishra wasn't just like a house. I don't know if you've been there, but it's like the boundary wall and it's like a whole big thing. The house of Kashi Mishra is like a big thing. But it's just referred to as the house of Kashi Mishra. So that's the relationship. They just had a close relationship with the king and a close relationship with each other. And he had capacity to take guests. So he made a request and Kashi Mishra was happy. Kashi Mishra was a Vaishnav, as was the king, a Vaishnav. And to host renounced, elevated Vaishnavas in his home, he was very happy. So that's the relationship. Does that address your question? Okay.
So I wanted to ask that golden complexion of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, was it visible to everyone or was it visible to only to his associates?
It was visible to everyone. His complexion was golden. Everyone.
The question on that is like, if Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was so learned, he had learned all the Vedas and Shastra. So he was, in the Shastra it is written clearly that like Krishna will come in this Kali Yuga in golden form and like that. So why couldn't he recognize, oh, was it just Krishna Leela that he did not really realize that I am asleep?
Because he was, his heart was hard. So he knew scriptures, but someone that knows scriptures can overlook something because the deluding potency is causing him to not see things that others may be able to see, like his brother-in-law, and that was part of what they discussed. I mean, there are other things that they discussed, but if you can read, one of them was Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said to refute the Gopinath Acharya's brother-in-law, please consider what you're saying. One of the names of the Supreme Lord is Triyuga, which means he doesn't appear in Kali Yuga. So you're making a reference to something that we as Vaishnavas know that's in Srimad Bhagavatam. And obviously he was familiar with Srimad Bhagavatam because he knew the Atmarama verse. So he wasn't unfamiliar with Srimad Bhagavatam. And there's a very clear, we're going to be discussing it during the Sunday class, Sunday evening program at the temple, a verse that you're referring to from 11th Canto, Chapter 3, where, the incarnations in this age are mentioned. And it's very clear there's an incarnation in Kali Yuga. But he was giving the argument, the atheistic argument, that one of the Lord's names is Triyuga, and therefore it means it's implied there's no form of the Lord in Kali Yuga. And Gopinath Acharya gave scriptural answers to that question. But your question was, since he knows the scriptures so thoroughly, why did he not know that there's an incarnation in Kali Yuga? Maya covered him. And then the covering was removed, in part by Gopinath Acharya. But even when Gopinath Acharya responded in such a manner he should have gotten it, he didn't accept it. Yes, he's a great saintly person, for sure. I mean, he was in a state of trance just seeing Lord Jagannath. A genuine trance. I tested him. It was a genuine trance. So he's not an ordinary person, but he's a great sannyasi. That's how he saw. So he didn't see. Which it happens. People that are learned can see something and not see other somethings. Any of our youth, younger generation, Vaishnavis and Vaishnavas, yes.
Some of the question, I just want to say, you think you don't have to, I just have short-term memory.
We'll be friends. But for you and me and people like us, it helps to hear again and again. And then it becomes, oh yeah. Maheshwara Visharada, now we remember. The father of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And his brother, Vidya Vajaspati. And if you hear it again and again, you come back, a year or two later, what was that name? What was the name of Nimai's brother who took sannyas? Vishwarup. Oh yeah, Vishwarup. So is this by hearing? There's so much of the remembering the names is less important than remembering the mood and the devotion involved, devotional exchanges involved. At least I feel that way. The details are important. So just hear again and hear again and hear again. Because the goal is not memorization. The goal is not scholarship. The goal is relishing the wonderful, loving dealings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and how he lifts people, just like the whole topic here was the deliverance of Vasudeva Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. It was step by step, by step, by step, by step. As he, Nimai, in his youth, he was super scholar. And he became transformed. That's a Leela, because he's already the personality of Godhead. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was, vastly learned. Brahaspati. But not a Vaishnav. So by association with his brother-in-law, he became at least the seed of bhakti was passed on to him, the blessings. And so the essence is the essence, not just the details, the names and some of those other things. But it's nice to learn because it makes it more personal. Kashi Mishra. Do you remember who was Kashi Mishra? Kashi Mishra. Kashi Mishra was the guru of the king. And he was friends with the chief priest of the king, whose name was, chief priest of the kings was named Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Yes.
So, Mayavadis get converted like Prakashana Saraswati and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. So, do the current Mayavadis accept that?
Oh no.
How do they perceive?
I don't know. They say many things. They say many things. Yes. One of the things I know they say is, just see, you're Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He accepted sannyas from one of our sannyasis. So there. And all this other stuff that you have about his being something, 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 that's all your folklore. He's just a follower of Shankaracharya. So you should become like that too. Anyway, yes. Which one?
When the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu fell ecstasy.
Yeah, he's in the temple and he fainted.
Yes, yes, yes. So then, first they took him to ocean, and then take the darshan of Jagannatha. So what is the significance? Like when we went to Puri, so Yogi said, first you have to go to the ocean and then go to the Jagannatha. So I'm just like,
And then go to the temple.
temple. So what is the significance?
He spontaneous attraction for Lord Jagannath. That's the significance. He was in another, he was in another state of consciousness already. So for such things, this is from Rupa Goswami's writings. He didn't give this as an example, but those who are on the platform of Bhava Bhakti, what to speak of Prema, those that are on the platform of Bhava Bhakti, they normally observe regulations, but they don't always, because sometimes their spontaneous love is so strong it supersedes the regulation. Like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya still sitting in bed, before brushing his teeth, before washing his hand, before anything, eating Mahaprasad. That's against the rules for a Brahmana. And Mahaprabhu pointed out, Sarvabhauma, look at you. You're not following the rules. And then he said, here's a higher rule. So like that. Okay, looks like we're good for the evening. Srila Prabhupada ki,
Jai.
Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki,
Jai.